First of all, before I begin, I'd like to describe my appearance for the blind folks here. So I am a white man in his 50s, and I'm wearing a cap and some blue glasses as well as a black suit. And unfortunately, I'm not single, I'm married, and so I have a ring on my left ring finger. First of all, thank you so much to Disability Rights California. All of the wonderful DRC board members, Chair Sandra Smith, and Board Secretary Sherry Farina for that lovely introduction. Thank you, Sherry, for your decades of advocacy and leadership. You are truly an inspiration. I'm grateful that the DRC has a deaf leader on your board. Sherry will keep reminding you of the importance of elevating deaf representation in all that you do. I would also like to acknowledge Chris Sokup, the CEO of Communication Services for the Deaf, as well as Haben Gurma, the first deafblind graduate of Harvard Law School, and Raven Sutton, who is a staffer at Disability Rights California, who recently was recognized as the Inspirational Influencer of the Year at the National Social Media Awards. I would also like to thank Andy Imperato, Executive Director, and Ken Datugan, DRC staffer. My wife Deanne Bray and I are so honored to receive this leadership award. It is true that we have combined decades of advocacy. My wife and I were just attending the SAG Awards in LA, and we remembered that we've been card-carrying members of SAG for about 30 years. My wife Deanne has been leading the charge for advancing deaf education as an educator, and as an actress, she played the leading role in the series Sue Thomas FBI, and she also acted on shows like Heroes, Grey's Anatomy, Veep, and Curb Your Enthusiasm. Before I won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for my role in the film Coda, I worked for over 20 years on stage for theater companies like NTD, National Theater of the Deaf, and Deaf West Theater. It was extremely hard to find paying deaf roles, and I often had to work multiple jobs to survive. I was on my last straw. I was on the verge of quitting acting forever when I got the role of Frank Rossi in Coda. Despite the long journey, I'm so grateful for all of my success. But long before I acted on stage and on screen, I was a kid who had to learn and embrace my deaf identity, deaf culture, and my natural language of ASL, American Sign Language. Yes, absolutely, representation matters, and seeing your experience on screen matters. But when I was a kid, growing up in Arizona in the 70s and in the 80s, there weren't any deaf characters on TV or on the film screen. There was no closed captioning on TV or in movie theaters. But I found my spark, my passion for acting, when I watched the animated cartoon Tom and Jerry. It was wonderful visual storytelling without spoken dialogue. You guys remember that show, right? I had a long commute from my home to the school for the deaf, and each morning I would perform in the aisle of the bus. I would reenact the episode of Tom and Jerry I had seen the day before. And I remember the children's eyes lighting up and their laughter as I showed Tom and Jerry chasing and fighting each other. Soon after, a deaf actor named Dennis Webster came to my school and performed. It was unforgettable. It was the first time my hearing parents and I had laughed at the same time while watching a performance. Afterwards, I went up to this deaf actor, and I said, "Are you really deaf?" And he said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." And I asked him, "Can I become an actor too?" And he said, "Of course you can." When I was a senior in high school, my father was hit by a drunk driver and was paralyzed from the neck down. He lost his ability to communicate in sign language. My family had to adapt and create new ways to communicate and find ways to heal, but the arts is what truly helped me heal. More than just healing, ASL and the arts saved my life. ASL was the bridge. ASL gave me access to the craft of acting. For over 35 years, I performed on theater stages around the world, and at 54 years old, I am the youngest deaf male to have won an Academy Award, and the second deaf person in history. Fortunately, the deaf community has had many advocates like you in our fight for equality, civil rights, justice, access to communication, and to finally be given a seat at the hearing world's table. However, in America today, there is a severe lack of access to the arts for deaf children. There is little to no access to internships, workshops, or mentorship programs in the arts for deaf kids. How can these very capable and very talented kids learn the arts, for example, the craft of acting, without these programs? I would like to encourage all of you wonderful advocates to consider the deaf and disabled when you are creating programs for the arts. There needs to be a pipeline, a way for these deaf kids to learn their craft and to continue to perfect it in a way where they can actually thrive. One day, I hope that we will have a deaf senator. One day, I hope that we will have a deaf president. One day, I hope that doctors, policemen, firemen, lawyers will all know sign language. May we all learn to heal, bridge, and thrive. May we all work together for a brighter and more inclusive future for our deaf children here in California, in America, and around the world. Again, Deanne and I are honored to receive this incredible award. We will continue to do all that we can to elevate the disability movement in TV and film. Thank you, Sherry, and thank you, DRC. Love you all.
So while Troy is making his way back to his seat, I think everybody understands the leadership that Troy provides goes beyond acting. He and his wife are a force for good in the entertainment industry and more broadly. He's a role model and a very visible deaf leader globally, and we're so honored to have him here in Sacramento with us tonight. So let's hear it again for Troy Kotsur. I also want to acknowledge we had a couple of other members of the state legislature here with us tonight. Senator Dave Cortez